Welcome to The Joyful Frugalista, the podcast that's all about living a richer life with less. I'm your host, Serina Bird, author and passionate frugalista. Each episode, we dive into inspiring stories, practical tips and joyful conversations that help you create abundance, embrace mindful spending, and live your best life, all without breaking the bank. So grab a cuppa, get comfy, and let's explore how being a frugalista can lead to freedom, happiness, and a whole lot of joy. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice. Please consult a qualified professional before making financial decisions. Yuma Frugalistas, and welcome. Today I have a special guest, and of course, all of my guests are special. Today's guest is someone who has been here as a guest before, but who now has a second book, so I've invited her back to speak about it. When we think about building wealth, often women focus more on the savings and investing part. In fact, my own work really focuses more on the frugal living and on the savings. But there's one other crucial piece, and that's earning power. Unfortunately, there is a massive earnings gap between men and women. Women earn less, and that then impacts them right throughout their life. Roxanne Calder is Managing Director of recruitment agency EST10 and is author of Employability, and you may have heard her podcast on that topic. Her new book, Earning Power, Breaking Barriers and Building Wealth for Women, challenges women to earn more. And don't just hear it from her, with her years of experience in recruiting. Her book, Earning Power, includes insights from Julia Ross, Peter Credlin AO, Nagi Mayahasi, I don't know if I've pronounced that right, founder of Recipe 10 Eats. I certainly do enjoy her recipes. Professor Fiona Wood AO, Christina Carson, founder of Kiki K, journalist Lila McKinnon, and Philip Kearns AM, who is a former Wallabies Union captain and CEO of AV Jennings. So, wow, quite a lot of guests in your book, and welcome again, Roxanne, to this podcast.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Serina.
It is such an honour to have you here, and I really, really enjoyed your book. I got a lot out of it, and actually slightly confronting for me to think about my career and places where I perhaps could have asked for more.
Yeah, I think the thing when writing the book and the message that I sort of wanted to also get clear with for people who are reading it is the actual fact is that every woman has been impacted by this. Lots of women will hear about the pay gap or hear about the fact that women earn less and they put it in a different category and they're like, oh, that's that woman over there. Or, no, that hasn't affected me. And I feel bad about it, but it certainly hasn't affected me. But I can promise you, all of us have been impacted by it. And it's not in the most obvious ways. And it's not really about asking for a pay rise at all. It's about establishing self-worth from the very beginning of the time that you enter the workforce.
Yeah, look, most definitely. And looking back in my career, there's certainly times when there's male colleagues who I know I've done better at university, who've gone up the ranks much quicker or have got other opportunities, whether it's opportunities for travel overseas or to live overseas. And I sort of gone, yeah, but I'm really good at that. Why didn't I get that opportunity?
Yeah, and I suppose I would pose that question back to you. Did you ask the question?
Yeah, good question. Sometimes I ask for feedback, but often the feedback's kind of very confronting. And sometimes the feedback was because I had family and because I was a single parent at that time. So there was this kind of unconscious bias, or very conscious actually in that case.
Yeah, and so the reason I posed that question back is because also in the book, what I sort of establish is if we just attribute the blame to other people or we say, oh, my boss didn't give me that opportunity, then we're taking the power out of our hands. Whereas if we see that and we're like, I wanted that opportunity, then we go up to our boss and we say, can I not even ask for feedback? Can I understand why that opportunity was given to that person over there and not myself? And you're right. Sometimes the feedback can be confronting in a way that it's feedback that we also don't want to hear. So it might be, well, actually, Serina, do you remember the project you worked on last year? That was really critical because that is tied to this position that we're now sending John to in Singapore. And that was all about relationship building. And do you remember that you didn't do this correctly or whatever it might be? And you might not be aware of it, but now you are because you asked that question. Or it could be exactly what you just said then. They assumed that you couldn't do the job because of your family commitments. And that's your opportunity to then say, well, that's incorrect. I'm still able to do that.
Uncomfortable truth right there at the beginning of this podcast. And you begin your book actually with talking about some anecdotes from Julia Ross. in terms of her family situation, like particularly her coming home after a very busy day at work, doing lots of things, and then hubby immediately goes, "There's no milk in the fridge."
Yeah, yeah. And putting the responsibility back on her. And she had, she was a CEO working incredible hours. She had offices globally. And she walks in the door and it's oh, by the way, there's no milk in the fridge. And I talk about that in the book in that absolutely 100% guarantee no other male CEO coming home that night was asked where the milk was. By the way, better run and get some milk. And it's, just a good example of what was going on at that time. But equally, it goes on now. And it doesn't mean that, it's not about being a CEO. It's about what's your responsibilities at work. And that typically that women then come home and carry on all of these additional caring responsibilities and household responsibilities. And we might say, but we want to do it or we choose to do it. Equally so, but how much of it is really choice? And we carry more than our share of that.
Look, I hear you, and I'm very blessed. My husband's very good with these things, but I must say I was really cranky 2 nights ago because I just sat down to do some podcast editing and there were some deadlines I really needed to meet and, balancing a lot of things between full-time work and family and podcasting. So this was important. And my younger son had a birthday party he wanted to go to and there was an issue about this. And I was like, well, can you just respond to this? He's like, no, it's always better when it comes from a mother. You should do it. I was like, this is just like, it's not that bad, but it's just, it's another 10 minutes work when I just sort of sat down to doing things. So yeah, there is that mental load, isn't there? All the organizational things and the relationship things that go on.
Look, it is. And I think it's also conditioning. We're used to playing that role and accepting that role. And I pose that question, not to be critical of it, but to really sort of uncover some of these uncomfortable truths. Because if we want to earn more, we really have to take some of that responsibility into our own hands. So, so that's why I sort of uncover these truths as gently as I possibly can. And there's no way that this is going to be solved, not in my lifetime. So, but we can start to make some of that progress. We've already made huge progress. I mean, let's face it, but still there's more to be done, especially when the gap in the earnings is $1 million. And I bring that up because it's just not the reported gap in the gender pay, which is specifically different to what I talk about in the book. But that gap in earnings is real because when that came out with the legislation last year, I remember thinking, why is everyone making such a big deal of this? Like, I've known about this $1 million gap in earnings between males and females forever because I see it. I see people go forward for jobs. I see people put their hand up and then pull their hand back, or they get given an opportunity for promotion. They say no to it. They take a role on that will expose them into learning and developing, and then they quit after 3 months. And I remember in my mind thinking, that decision, I'd added it up. I'm like, that decision hasn't cost you the $5,000 increase or the $10,000 increase. It's actually cost you $1 million if you add this up and compound it over your lifetime. So I, had already formulated that sort of formula. And so when it came out again, I was like, I didn't know whether to be like, I don't know, sort of secretly a little bit like chuffed that I'd already worked out that amount, or to be actually disgusted. It's real. Like, that's not good.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? In one sense, it's great to be validated, but in another sense, it's such a shocking figure.
Horror. It's a horror. Yeah, yeah.
And you do a lot of the maths in your book about how you've worked this out.
Yeah, I like numbers, I like stats, I like research, because it's one thing to think something and then you sort of go back and you calculate it. And it's some of the most simple decisions. One example, the one I like to quote all the time is the woman who doesn't take a pay increase for 10 years. And lots of people who are listening to this might be thinking, oh, come on, Rox, that's not true. You're just using that as one example to prove your point. But equally, for every one person that is thinking that, I can promise you there's someone that's out there, another one person out there, maybe it's not as high as 50%, but I bet it's 1 in 4 that are nodding and saying, yeah, that's me. And that person who's saying, that's me, is never going to tell you that when they have coffee. When you catch up with your girlfriends for lunch, or whatever it might be, they're not going to be the one contributing to the conversation when you complain because you didn't get your pay increase or you missed out on a promotion or whatever it is. They're not going to say, well, guess what? I haven't had a pay increase for 10 years. But I'm telling you, I meet these women and I know that it exists. And that lack of a pay increase for 10 years, and I'm talking about no wage growth, so not even a CPI increase, will cost that woman close to $140,000 in lost earnings over 10 years.
So what's happening here to make so many women not have a pay increase? There has been, a bit
bit in the media about how our wages have been stagnating. So we haven't been seeing the same sort of wage growth that, say, we might have seen 20 years ago, but it's more than that, right?
So this, when it comes to the gender, which is what I've sort of honed in on with women, it's more than that. So, for example, that example of the person not receiving a pay increase for 10 years, that stems from, the lack of confidence, the lack of self-esteem and self-belief. So if you're in that position, my question if I was coaching someone, my question to that person would be, why haven't you asked the question? In the same way I said to you, did you ask your
I know
boss?
it's uncomfortable, right? But it's really important.
Yeah, but if you're a male, it's not so uncomfortable. It's natural. It's a natural dialogue, more so to do that. Obviously not for every male, but what I'm saying is it's more likely that they will have that conversation with ease. Whereas for some reason, women don't. And when they do, they then get labeled bossy, ballsy, difficult, demanding, whatever it might be. And it's
Bossy,
just not
yeah.
true. Yeah.
Yeah, all of those things.
So if you're in that situation, you need to have that conversation. Says, I haven't had a pay increase for 3 years. Is there a reason for that? Good. I'm glad you brought that up, Roxanne, because I want to talk to you actually. It's about your performance. I'd love to give you a pay increase, but you've whatever called in late once every week. You come into work late. You're not reliable. It means the team have to pick up the pieces, whatever it might be. Like you want to hear it. If that's feedback that you can change, maybe you weren't aware that you being 5 minutes late causes such distress to the team dynamics, or maybe it's the fact that you hand in assignments late and therefore it reflects on the team, or maybe it's because you don't handle clients the right way and therefore it's a loss of revenue. Whatever the reason is, you either want to know so you can fix it, or if there is no reason, then you leave. This is about empowering and putting people back in a position to make choices. You either choose to improve or you leave because you know that that's not going to improve. And if you believe that you are doing a good job, then you go somewhere else and get paid better.
That is so empowering right there. And it's a weird thing, isn't it, that sometimes people don't value people who are performing well at work, especially women. Like there's this tendency to think that they will just take on more and more and more. Like with a man who takes on more, they tend to go, good job, you're showing resourcefulness, you're taking the initiative. But with women, it's sort of expected. And when they say, look, enough's enough, that they sort of then get labelled in different ways.
Well, I'm not sure that this conversation, like in the book, is about, it's not so much about the lack of boundaries. It's rather about because I think the work situation for men is probably similar like that. I don't know that it's always the men that get the credit. I think females also get the credit, but I think what we're talking about here is we don't put ourselves in a situation enough to get the credit, and maybe we need to ask for the credit as well if we are doing that extra work. That we need to get better at self-promoting because it's one of the things that we're not good at. And maybe that male that was congratulated, maybe he was very good at self-promoting, and it's not to say because males do that better, that we should be critical of it. We should be applauding it and copying it. Because it's not about, I want to be also clear that when I wrote this book, this was never about a male bash. It's actually about an empowerment for women and an encouragement for women.
Yeah, no, I definitely, the vibe in your book is very encouraging. And it's also very approachable and very easy to read book.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
And, some really great insights from your many guests. You've got quite a diverse panel of people that you have consulted with and have included case studies on.
Yes, yeah, and I wanted diversity on purpose so that we weren't hearing just from one sector. I wanted people who were ranging in age group, from professions, from the backgrounds that they came from, so that it was, an interesting and wide variety.
Yeah, it's great. Did you have any favourite interviews as you did the book?
Look, they were all amazing. I mean, Julia is my ex-boss, so it was just lovely to, I catch up with her regularly, but it was lovely to catch up with her and hear her stories, fabulous stories. Every one of those women were so generous and so kind in the time that they gave me and in the generosity of the amount of information they gave me. I could have written a book on each of them. They were incredible. Yeah, I felt inspired and privileged afterwards.
Well, and so vulnerable too in terms of what they shared, and also so practical.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a real book about real success. So it's not, sometimes people, actually not so often, but, there's always a risk that people write about success in order to be successful. But this is definitely got the success coming first.
Yeah. I definitely wanted people to have some takeaways. And look, it's hard writing books like this because I think people expect answers to be just, oh, great, that's what I've got to do. Well, the truth of the matter is a lot of the self-help books come from, and this isn't a self-help book, but, sort of a little bit touches on that. It comes from within at the end of the day. And if you picked up the book with the idea that you want to improve, you're halfway there.
Yeah, most definitely. There was a lot of takeaways for me as well. But, you've also got some practical advice about what women can actually do to boost their earnings. So what are some of the takeaways for the things that women can do?
Well, I think stop waiting to be 100% ready, because that's never going to be the case, and with that, you've just got to back yourself, stop hesitating, master self-advocacy so that you're able to stand up for yourself. And when you do that, that you don't go home and then overanalyze it. I think understand maybe the glass cliff opportunities. So there's some of the opportunities that are presented to women that are particularly precarious.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to be able to know when that's the case. And equally, I'm not saying say no to them, but then put the right perspective and boundaries in place so that you can be successful. So if you recognize that that is a risky endeavor you're about to step into, you want to understand what support you're going to receive and question all of the aspects that go with it, so you set up the right structures to support you.
Before we go on, some of my listeners might not know about the glass cliff. I'm very well aware of that, but maybe let's just do a bit of a deep dive into what it is and some examples of it.
So it's when women are more likely to be promoted into high risk, unstable positions, especially in moments of crises. So, and therefore the risk of failure is even higher. So it could be that they don't have enough resources. It could be accepting a leadership position with no real authority, so they can't make the right decisions. And therefore the likelihood of failure increases as well. And we have this sort of cycle. We've seen that sort of happen if you sort of look at some of the exec positions that women have taken on. And, in recent times, you can sort of analyze that a little bit more. So it's really about being aware of that possibility for you if you're about to take on a role like that. You want to set yourself up for success, and you want the appointment to be set up for success as well.
Yeah, look, that's a big one, because, you assume that everyone wants you to succeed, but sometimes people put someone in place that they want to set up to fail.
That's right. And because then can justify, the unconscious bias that is already sort of ruminating in your mind.
And sorry, I interrupted you before as you were talking about the things that women can do to boost their earnings.
So they network, but network for social capital. What I mean by that is be strategic on who you are networking and developing as contacts. And I don't mean to use people by any stretch, but you want to make sure that the people that you are networking with are willing to support you actively. So you want to have people who, whether they're going to be sponsors or mentors. So it's one thing to have a network of people. I don't know, like I might interview someone and I might talk about their networking. I say, who do who's within your network? And they might say, I've got a really great mother's club or a book club. And so in my mind, I'm like, okay, who's in the book club that is going to help you with work? Because that's great, that's social, but that's not going to help you work-wise with social capital. So when you go to a networking event, when you go there, what's the purpose of doing that? And who are you networking with? Who are you networking with from your old jobs, from industry events, old bosses, etc.? Because you really want those people to be the ones who will happily endorse you.
Yeah, networking's a funny thing. Like, I think sometimes women are naturally good at it, but sort of feel bad that somehow it's dishonest, or that it feels like it's too calculating.
Yeah, and I understand when you're younger. I probably was the same. And I think it comes from a place, I see networking, I have no problem with networking because I know if someone reaches out to me, I will help them. And so when I reach out to people for help, which isn't often, I've got to say, it's not like I'm like always doing that, but if I've got a problem or a situation and I want it to be a good outcome, then I'll think, who do I know that could help me? I'm like, oh, I might give Serena a call. And I bet you if I reached out to you, you would help me, right?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, vice versa.
Within reason.
Yeah, yeah,
it was.
yeah, obviously not for anything that was, but within your realm of expertise is why I'd be reaching out to you for advice on that. So if that's the case, that's how networking is. But you have to be able to reciprocate as well. You've got to be someone that is also a giver, and you have to be grateful. And equally, in that mentoring relationship as well, if you have sought out a mentor and you're getting advice, etc., you have to be coachable, and you also have to be someone that's going to take on the advice, because I can promise you the mentor will get tired of giving you advice if you don't action on it.
You've had that experience?
I think everyone's had that experience. If you've been in that position where you've coached people and everything like that, everyone's been in that experience. And it's, to be expected, because to do that, you have to get out of the comfort zone. But equally, you can't keep going back to that person for advice, or if you're not going to act on it on a regular basis.
Yeah, definitely. Because you're not changing, you're not listening, you're not growing.
Yeah. Yeah, and probably the final piece is we've got to get really comfortable negotiating and negotiate on everything, whether that's money, benefits, perks, whatever it might be. We need to get comfortable with that because there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, that is very uncomfortable. I think not just for women, but also Australians. It's sort of, for some, it's in our culture, but for some, really not.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it doesn't matter, we can take this outside of work now and we can talk about anything that you're about to purchase, negotiate on all of it. So then when you come back to the work situation, why wouldn't you do that for yourself? Like that's the best position that you can put yourself in. If you're receiving a job offer and it's less than you anticipated, push back on it.
Yeah, because otherwise there's no point in moving, right? Unless there's other reasons that you're moving, such as the culture where you are.
Growth. Yeah, growth, all those sorts of things. Yeah.
Yeah, but most definitely. Yeah, it is strange that women often don't negotiate more. And, I have to say that I'm a little bit guilty of this. And because of my public service background, we're all based on levels. So you can't really ask for a promotion within that band. But what you can do is ask for higher duties opportunities. And
That's
I have
right.
asked for some in the past, but I don't ask for enough, I don't think. So just all of those ways that you could think about, well, maybe you can't do it as directly as you can in a corporate sector, but there are other things you can ask for.
And I'm so glad you brought that up because lots of people will be thinking, but I'm on a banding, I'm in the health sector, I'm in childcare, whatever it is, where it's really difficult to get that movement unless you're in more of a corporate private sector. But you are right, it's about being seen, about being visible, about being proactive. And at the end of the day, you're choosing to go into those industries. So that's one thing to sort of acknowledge, but equally, you can still do so much more to position yourself in the best possible way.
Yeah, totally, exactly. And there's, so much that you can do. And what I think is a key theme coming out of here is it is your own responsibility.
Well, that's right. I've always been an advocate for responsibility, accountability, all of those sorts of things. I've never personally let other people take charge of my finances or my outcome. And what comes with that is you got to wear it when it the responsibility with that goes with it. But then you learn from it and you just sort of keep going ahead with it. It's scary, but it's just the way it is.
And that whole concept of knockbacks and dealing with knockbacks. In fact, you have your former Wallabies player Philip Kearns speaks quite passionately about this in the book, about how the worst that can happen is that you might get a no.
Rejected. That's right. And what's the best that can happen? I can tell you, I went through that whole roller coaster when I was writing the book, when I was reaching out to people. And I didn't reach out to a lot. I've got to say, I was incredibly lucky that the ladies, pretty much the people that I went to accepted. There's probably about 4 ladies that I also went to that weren't able to do that. But they all came back to me really respectfully, really lovely, in a really nice way. And gee, it's really, I don't know, it was a wonderful experience to sort of craft or draft who I wanted to approach, work out a communication around that, follow it up, and then wait for the response, follow up the responses, etc. And when they said yes, it was a wonderful feeling. So, you might get rejected, but wow, the positive of getting a positive response back far outweighs that rejection. You cannot diminish that high.
I've had that too with podcasts. I once read something from someone on LinkedIn and it really resonated. So I asked him to be a podcast guest and he said, come back later in 6 months. What I didn't realize was that he had 2 million LinkedIn followers. I think it was about 2 million. It was just, I thought he was a friend of a friend. I didn't really situate. But, I'm sure he thought I would have forgotten. But it was a great interview. And actually, it turned out that, his father had this hawker stall in Singapore when he grew up, had a very frugal and very poor background as a child. And so this whole frugal message really was, related to him. So it was a really great conversation.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. And at the end of the day, some of the people that we sort of admire or put on, pedestals, they're normal people. And, so that's great. I'm glad you had that good experience.
And you certainly give a normal people side to some very famous people in your book.
They were, I can't emphasize how delightful they were to meet. So it was a privilege. Yeah.
Fabulous. Now, one final question for you. Seeing we were talking about frugal living before, do you have a frugalista tip to share?
Let me think. I don't know if it's a frugalistic so much. We recently reviewed our electricity bill. They'd sent it through as a renewal and it had gone up a lot.
Yeah, that's a bit of a trick when they do that.
I'm sorry, but I'm just going to call it out. It's really deceitful. I'm sorry, it lacks morals. And no, it really does. I feel strongly about it. And so my husband went on, the website where you can check it all and we changed. And then they followed up and like, you've changed, really sorry, we can help or whatever. And we're like, are you joking? Like, the thing for me is we were able to do that. But what about for people who, I don't know if it might be pensioners or people like that, that just trust? That's why I'm saying I find it quite disgraceful from a corporate perspective, that trust that their bill will be best looked after. And if it's meant to be renegotiated at a better rate, they will give them the best rate possible. So I don't know, I have a values issue with all of that.
Well, it's not just energy companies, although I've had the same experience of sort of
Banks,
switching
all
back
of
and
it.
forward. And then in amongst all of that, because I was with my original provider and I was saying I was going to switch and got a better deal. And then the original one said, well, we can switch back. And then the other one said we can do even better. And then the original one said we can switch back. And that was all fine. But we're about to go on holidays over Christmas. And then the original ones who'd said, yes, we will keep you on and we'll give you a better rate, then sent me a notice saying they were disconnecting our power because we'd changed providers. And thankfully I got the notice in time, but otherwise I would have come back after Christmas to like everything defrosted in the freezer.
Yeah.
But no, that's certainly a great tip. And it's not just power and energy. It's a whole range of things, including
That's
mortgages.
Right. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Yeah, all of those elements add up.
Yeah, they put a lot more money into attracting new clients, which is kind of a bit crazy. Why you wouldn't look after your existing ones, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, Roxanne, thank you so much for being my guest today. Best wishes on your new book. I know it's going to be a fantastic success, just like your last one, and wish you all the best.
Wonderful. Thanks, Serina. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
See you.